Okay. Good evening. Today's Council Finance Committee meeting. There's, let's see, Councilman Mike Brown from the 5th District and Councilman Cozy Weatherspoon from the 2nd District, Councilwoman Linda Barnes Caldwell from the 5th District, and I'm Mary Brown, 3rd District Councilwoman, Chairman of the Finance Committee. So on this evening's agenda, we have 2021 59, 70, 71, and 73. 59 is an ordinance approving subsidies for the general fund during calendar year 2021. 70 is an ordinance appropriating monies for the purpose of defraying the expenses of the Gary Public Library. 71 is an ordinance appropriating monies for the purpose of defraying the expenses of the Special Redevelopment General Tax Base Fund of the City of Gary for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2022 and ending December 31, 2022. And 73 is, let's see, an ordinance approving salaries for the employees of the City of Gary's General Parks, COED, MVH, which is Motor Vehicle Highway, pension and fire tax base funds for the calendar year 2022, sponsored by Mayor Jerome Prince and Malik Harper, City Controller. So we're going to take them in the order that they appear. Good evening, Councilwoman Caldwell. It's good to see you. And so, Mrs. Colvin, it's good to see you. So we're ready to start. And we will start with CPO 2021-59.
Councilwoman Brown, I'll take that ordinance.
Okay.
This is an ordinance that approves the subsidies to the general fund for the calendar year 2021. I had originally submitted an ordinance, and this is an amended version. So the amendment is what we're asking to be approved. These are the salary or the subsidy amounts that we will be needing for the balance of the year, and we will draw them down as we need them. From Fund 877 LDA, which is the local development agreement, we're requesting a subsidy amount in the amount of, excuse me, $6,400,000. From the seeded fund, Fund 462, we are requesting a subsidy amount in the amount of $1,200,000. And in Fund 277, wagering, we are requesting an amount of $6 million. All of these subsidy amounts go into the general fund to help defray the cost of payroll, fringe benefits, and vendor payments.
Okay. Present this evening is Councilman Cozy Weatherspoon from the 2nd District, Councilman Mike Brown from the 5th District, and Councilwoman Linda Barnes Caldwell from the 5th District, and Councilman Dwight Williams from the 6th District, and of course, Arlene Colvin is here. So we're ready. Oh, and Malik Harper, our City Controller, is here. So we are ready to start. So if anybody has any questions or any comments on CPO 2021-59, we'll start with that one. Anybody have any questions or comments? Nobody? Okay. Arlene, we're in luck. Nobody wants to ask anything.
Yeah, we are in luck, Councilwoman.
Okay, so then since nobody has any questions on 2021-59, we'll move on to 2021-70, which is an ordinance appropriating monies for the purpose of defraying the expenses of the Gary Public Library. So we're ready. I don't know who's.
So we will ask Ms. Morrow if she will go ahead and give the overview for her ordinance. Diana Morrow is the executive director of the Gary Public Library.
Oh, okay. Well, we're happy to meet Mrs. Morrow. We don't know her. Hi, Mrs. Morrow. So it's a pleasure
Hello.
to meet you.
It's nice to meet you again too, Miss Brown. Miss
Okay.
Brown. And I'm not sure how to do this. We haven't had to come before, I think maybe once for an additional appropriation. But if Arlene can help me, I think what we're asking, I do have my acting controller on. I don't know if her picture is on or if you all can hear her, Angela Lewis.
Good afternoon.
If we can
Hi.
hear.
Hi.
We can
So
hear her.
Diana, if you'll just tell the council members how much you're asking for in your budget for 2022 and go from there.
We're asking the council to approve our budget in the amount of $4,113,113.89 for the 2022 year. And that's for our entire budget.
Okay, is there a reason why it changed from last year, or can you tell us?
Yeah. I can. There was an error made last year when the budget was submitted. The entire line items was not included on everything, which caused us this year to have to come to the council. So the only items that were approved for last year was basically
Wages and benefits.
right. And then we did an additional appropriation. So for this year's entire budget, we had to come before the council because now it exceeded the limit. So that's what happened last year. It was an error in the submission to the budget.
Okay,
And this was the first time that this error had been made. It was some things going on with the current controller at the time who was out, and just a number of things, but it was basically an overall error.
okay. Anybody have any questions or comments on 70?
I would like Ms. Lewis to turn her camera on so I can get a look at who I'm talking to.
Oh,
Please,
I
thank you.
thought it was on. Hold on one moment, please.
And I
Okay,
think it did ask us to attend as panelists or attendee. I chose panelists, so I was able to control my camera. I think Ms. Lewis already selected attendee. I don't know if she can turn hers on.
I got the camera in, but I can't turn it on.
Okay.
okay. I don't know. Councilwoman Caldwell, you still can't see her? Is that what you're saying?
No, I can't.
Okay,
If she's only an attendee, then she'll have to receive an invitation to become a panelist in order for you to be able to see her.
okay.
And that would have to come from your media team.
Mr. DeLavalot, yes. Mhm.
Well, Mr. DeLavalot is here, so,
That has already happened. and
Okay,
She wouldn't be able to talk if she weren't a panelist. She
Oh,
has to
okay.
turn her camera on.
okay. All right. So that is it? You don't have, let's see. Gary Public Library. All outstanding claims and obligations. So you're saying that there was an error made last year and you're correcting it this year?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Council
right.
Lady Brown?
yes.
Yes, I have a question for Ms. Morrow or
Yes.
either Mr. Lewis. How many libraries do we actively have open at this point in time?
We currently have 3 that are open. And you mean open due to COVID or just open period, how many we have?
Open to the public, and what are their
Oh, there I
locations?
am.
That we have 3. We just, 2 of the 2 smaller branches are open 2 days per week. And the other days they're doing curbside. Here at the main branch, which is 220 West Fifth Avenue, we're open 6 days a week.
Okay. Do you still have the mobile bus service that you used before?
We have our Techmobile. We do have that. We currently just recently lost our Techmobile driver. He moved away, so we don't necessarily have anyone to drive it. We are looking for someone. But it went from the Bookmobile, it was renovated to the Techmobile, but yes, we do still have that.
And what do you do with that? Do you service schools, or what do you do exactly with that?
We service schools, churches, basically anyone who contact us will go out to those locations. And we put different things on the Techmobile so that the community can see what we have. We have a printer, we have laptops, so we do have all of that on the Techmobile.
It's
Okay.
been a while since I've gotten my, or it's been a while since I've had a library card. I think it might be time to come and renew it.
Oh,
Ye-
definitely.
Yeah.
And maybe if we could even set up a day where the city could come down and see the Techmobile and the library, since it's renovated as well.
I think we'd like to do that.
Okay,
I've always liked the library. Yeah,
yes,
so.
we would love that.
I think that would be good for us to come down and take a look.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Morrow.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Ms. Morrow? Okay, then if not, we'll move on to CPO 2021-71. 2021-71 is an ordinance appropriating monies for the purpose of defraying expenses of the Special Redevelopment General Tax Base Fund of the City of Gary. So is that for you, Mr. Harper, or who is that for? Or is that for you, AJ, or who?
I'll just give a brief update on this. The ordinance is appropriating monies for the purpose of defraying the expenses of the special redevelopment
Mhm.
general tax base funds. What I'm aware of, this information is actually similar to what was presented last year. Let's see, their budgeted amount, it looks like here, the revenue amount is $211K. If I'm not correct, AJ or Carl, if you can, give an update on it.
Mr. Harper, that's correct. That's after the estimated circuit breaker impact. The net revenues for the year would be $211,262. So the budget is pretty much similar to what it was for this year, 2021.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Sender, thank you very much. Hi.
You're welcome, Councilwoman Brown.
Okay, now, is there anybody who has any questions or comments I'd like to know before we move on? Okay. All right. CPO 2021-73, which is, let me read it and see. An ordinance approving salaries for the employees of the City of Gary's general parks, COET, MVH, pension, and fire tax base funds. So I'm ready. 73.
This ordinance is approving the salaries for the employees for the City of Gary General Parks, COET, MVH, pension, and fire tax base funds. This is the information that will be amended per our conversation, Councilwoman Brown. And we will be amending that and sending it out to each and every council member
Okay.
by tomorrow morning.
Okay, then we will have to do an amended ordinance, and we will do that as soon as we get the information, the updated information. We will amend the ordinance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But does anyone have any questions prior to our amending the ordinance?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Harper are there any individuals who are receiving funds from the Gary Sanitary District in this budget?
Yes, but it's not shown on the document.
Okay, all of that needs to be on the document, and I specifically want to know exactly what their non-governmental role is per the statute in terms of the work that they're doing for the public utility.
I have a question. Are you saying that the monies that those persons who are receiving from the Gary Sanitary District, you want to know what those monies are for, right?
Exactly, because
Okay.
the statute specifically states that yes, you can receive, the mayor and others can receive dollars, but you
Uh-huh.
have to state what you're doing is non-governmental in
Okay.
terms of the work that you're doing. I know that there is no special administrator in the city of Gary, so I don't understand. I'm assuming that there is no salary currently going to the mayor beyond his city of Gary payroll. Am I correct in that?
If you're asking Mr. Harper.
I'm asking Mr. Harper.
From what I know, yes. So I'll have to make sure.
On what basis?
But I have to make sure. So I want to make sure I just received the information today, so I hadn't had the opportunity to look through.
And Attorney Colvin, are you aware of if a salary, there's never been since January 1 of 2020, a special administrator at the Gary Sanitary District. Per the consent decree, it mentions a $54,000 max payment. But since there hasn't been one court appointed, why would anybody be receiving such a salary?
So I will let Mr. Harper get that information and get to you.
Thank you, because I believe that even if one is receiving it, it would have to be specifically approved, just like all the others, by the Common Council. So if one has been gotten, I don't understand why or how over the last 19 or 20 months, and I think that would be an added exception with the State Board of Accounts, because again, that number is tied to the special administrator role, number one, and number two, this body never approved it. So I think we need to make sure that that's being done properly over there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look into it for you.
Okay, you'll have that information. You'll have that information for us
Yes.
tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, we'd like to have that. Okay. 2021-73. There are no more questions.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman Brewer.
So, Madam Chair, are we going, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, are we going from each department like we normally do to talk about the budget?
Apparently not. That is what we used to do in the past. We would go by department, but apparently we're not doing that.
Well, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Councilman Brewer.
Yes.
Can I chime in real quick, Madam Chair?
Sure.
So I want to be transparent with the council. So prior to this meeting, I did meet with our controller, Malik Harper, earlier today to just get alignment in terms of how we should proceed with the schedule of the budget review, and also to Councilman or President Godwin's point, getting confirmation on which salary or roles prospectively, not individually, but just the role and the titles, are obtaining the utility pay from the GSD. So he did confirm that he will get that update to us, and Councilwoman Brewer, I'm sorry, Brown, Councilwoman Brown, he will get that to us within the next day or so. And so to that point, I didn't think that it would be proper for us to go ahead and proceed if we don't even have the updated order in front of us, right? Okay. And also the operating budget, which will be reviewed in the Ways and Means Committee, there's also some changes that should be done for that, which is CPO 2021-74. And again, we don't have that in front of us, so it makes no sense for us to have executive directors giving us an overview. We haven't even looked at the information to be able to intelligently question and probe the right way, right? So Councilwoman Brown, as the chair of the Finance Committee, I suggested to Mr. Harper that you and I work together to create a schedule for the following committee meetings, which will not take place next week because it's a public meeting, but the week after. And so we'll probably do 2 days, right? And so we'll do, since the salary budget is in the finance committee, operating budget is in the ways and means, we'll have 2 days of meetings for both committees. And then we will let those department heads know which ones will be meeting with us on the first day to do their overview for both the operating and as well as the salary budgets, and then which ones will be meeting with us to come in front of the council to do the second review, because that's the proper way to do it. And that will give us an opportunity to look at the updated information that we receive within the next day or so from the controller's office, us to prepare whatever analysis we have, and if there's any additional amendments that needs to be made prior to that next committee meeting, that it'll give us time to do that.
Okay.
And then that means that our third and final, if all goes well, will be on October the 5th.
Okay.
And Councilwoman Atkins is absolutely correct. That is the way we've always done it, but I don't know why it has been changed.
I think we just jumped the gun, Councilwoman. And
Well,
we
may
had
I
new
say
people.
something
We
too?
didn't.
A couple of things.
Well,
Yeah.
May I?
Yes.
First of all, the schedule with the department heads is set by the council. So
Yes.
that's not something that we do. So the schedule that Councilwoman Atkins just mentioned sounds right on point. That's what we've been doing in the past, but that is set up by you guys, not us. But secondly, I wanted to point out, Councilwoman Atkins, you said the public hearing is October final. Did you say final passage of public hearing on October 5th?
no, I said that if we meet, which will be the last week in September, which will be the week of the 27th, will be our next week for committee meetings, that means that the public meeting for review will be October the 5th.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had the right dates, because I know those are published, and I didn't want us to get ahead of ourselves. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. That's like 3 weeks away, so we should be good to go.
Yes.
So you think by what's that, the second meeting in October, we're thinking we had a budget ready to pass in the second meeting?
We should, I would think so. So to Attorney Colvin's point, Mr. Harper sent us an email that had a pseudo schedule, but I don't think that we followed it or brought it back up. It was an email, and I think that it was missed in terms of, okay, we should utilize this just for like a tentative timeline in terms of what we should have everything done by, because keep in mind, as we did last year, we had that hard deadline when the budget has to be uploaded to Gateway, I believe it is, right? So everybody on this call needs to keep that in mind, right? And so we will be in line with that deadline based on what I just tentatively said verbally in terms of us, because then you'll have at least 2 public meetings, even if something has to go back to committee, to still be done. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay, Chairwoman?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. Anybody else have any comments? Did I acknowledge you, Councilman Williams? I didn't know you were here. Pardon?
Yes, you did acknowledge me.
Okay. All right.
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay. Well, Councilman Atkins is correct. So that's the way we've done it in the past. So if there are no further questions on CPO 2021-73, then that is the last ordinance for the Finance Committee. And then we will simply move on. Is that correct? We'll move on to Ways and Means. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I just wanted to note that Mr. Harper is going to provide that overview, I think maybe next week or the next set of committee meetings. So one that's going to be the broad overview of where all the dollars are coming from, personnel and operations, right? So the totality. So that's something that we're also looking forward to in the executive summary, so that we all have a big picture analysis of where things are.
okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. If that was it, then that concludes the Finance Committee meeting. That concludes our Finance Committee meeting.
Good evening and welcome to the Ways and Means Committee meeting for Tuesday, September the 14th. I am Councilwoman Ty Atkins, your chair of the Ways and Means Committee and also Vice President of Gary Common Council and representative of the 4th District, the fabulous 4th District. Joining me this evening today, I have the following colleagues. I have Councilwoman Mary Brown from the 3rd District. I have Councilman Cozy Weatherspoon from the 2nd District. I have Councilwoman Linda Bronze Caldwell of the 5th District. And I am sure my colleague will join us later, the 6th District. I'll announce him when he joins us. Also, my council members at large, Councilman Mike Brown, who is a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and also Councilman Ron Brewer, Councilman at large. Oh, my president's not here. Okay, well, that's okay. So on the Ways and Means Committee agenda today, we have 2 items, actually. The first item is CPO 2021-72, which is an ordinance for the city of Gary, Lake County, Indiana, approving an American Rescue Act, which we refer to as ARPA spending plan, sponsored by Mayor Jerome A. Prince, City of Gary, and also Mr. Malik Harper, our city controller. Also on the agenda, we initially had CPO 2021-74, which is an ordinance appropriating monies for the purpose of defraying the expenses for the general parks, coded, seated, CCI, CCD, MVH, LRS, fire pension, police pension, tax-based funds for the city of Gary, Indiana for the fiscal year beginning in January 1, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2022. Including all outstanding claims and obligations and fixing a time. Well, this is long with this, that this shall take effect. This is basically, in layman's term, the operating budget for the city for 2022. This is sponsored by our Mayor Jerome A. Prince and also Malik Harper, who is our city controller. Just want to see if any additional colleagues have joined us. Yes, my councilman from the 6th District, Councilman Dwight Williams, has also joined the committee meeting. So, yeah, Mike's here. Awesome. Yep. So I'm going to give some housekeeping. So today we will only be discussing in detail CPO 2021-72. 74 will be deferred to a later committee meeting, which will be announced at our upcoming public meeting, which will be next week on September the 21st. During that meeting, we will also have the various department heads come and present and detail the overview in terms of what changes or perspective suggestions they have put into the elements of this operating budget for 2022. If you missed the Finance Committee meeting that took place an hour ago, the same thing will be happening for CPO 2021-73, which is the salary budget for the city of Gary for 2022. Again, in detail, we will discuss that at a Finance Committee meeting, which will be announced at our next public meeting, which is Tuesday, the 21st. And we will also, again, go in detail and have the various department heads and city officials come and review that with us in a collaborative effort. So we will proceed with 72. So Mr. Harper, will you be giving the overview for 72? Attorney Colvin?
I can give it.
Okay.
Okay, Attorney Colvin.
This is an ordinance establishing a spending plan for our ARPA money. As most people are aware, in order for the city of Gary to gain access to and utilize monies that came to us from the federal government under the American Rescue Plan Act, the council has to approve a spending plan, after which the council will then appropriate dollars based on that spending plan. We have looked at about 3 areas that we believe should be included in the plan, and we are submitting this, I think, with consensus, I hope, with regard to the 3 areas that we have identified that funding can actually be approved for. The first is the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the emergency. And I guess in layman's terms, this is a category where the revenues between 2019 and 2020 are identified to see if there is a difference in that amount. And we are allowed to utilize for government services those an amount of dollars from ARPA that would cover that loss. In our case, that amount is $10,150,493. The idea would be that these dollars would be used for government services directly, and then that would free up money in the general fund for other purposes. So that's category one. The next category would be for workers performing essential work under COVID-19 for public health emergency by providing funds for premium pay. This is what is commonly called hazard pay. And we're suggesting that this amount be appropriated at an amount of $5 million. This work, well, under the ARP Act, those persons who actually fit into the category as actually performing essential work is identified. In other words, the Act is pretty specific about who can and cannot be paid premium pay. And essentially what it amounts to is people who are in public safety, people who are in public health, and any other workers who have come in direct contact with the public during the COVID emergency. So that, in our case, is a little over about 400 people, if you include those categories that I just identified. And we are requesting or think that an allocation of $5 million will provide the funding that we might need for premium pay. And the last category that we're settled on was the payment for payroll and covered benefit expenses for public safety, to the extent that their services were devoted to mitigating or responded to COVID-19. In order for anyone to qualify under this category, they would have to be, first of all, public safety people, and they would have to be devoted to mitigating or responding to COVID-19. We wanted to make sure that we had a conservative amount here, because I'm not sure if we could actually say that 100% of our public safety people actually responded to COVID-19. So in order to ensure that we don't have any, I'll say, missteps in this category, we decided to half this amount, do 50% of our payroll and cover benefit expenses, and are requesting that $18 million, be allocated under this particular category. One of the things I like to point out about this particular category is there is an amount in the 18 million that covers the 2022 budget. There's also a smaller amount in this amount that will represent the last 3 months of this year. So this is not just 18 million for 2022, it's for 21 and 22. So I wanted to point that out. So I'll entertain any questions that anybody might have. And I want to re-emphasize that this is a plan that we're asking for approval on, and not the actual appropriation.
Thank you, Attorney Colvin. I do have a couple of follow-up questions, almost one for each one of the, I guess, tentative buckets that we have listed within the ordinance.
Okay.
So I'll go in order. So for the first one, this was, Councilwoman, go on.
I'm unmuted.
Go on. Yes, ma'am. There you go. You got it. Okay. So for the first bucket, which was respective to our revenue, I do want to give those who are watching from the public an opportunity to kind of understand a little bit more about how we got to the 10 million going around.
Okay.
So if Mr. Sender is on, if he could just give us a general sense, you know, I like the details, but not too much detail, Mr. Sender, but at least, you know, the formula, and then also just reference what our revenue was from 2019 and 2020, and, you know, our growth percent, blah, blah, blah.
Sure. So we're allowed to compare certain revenues. It's quite a broad category of revenues, basically city revenues from 2020 and 2019 So just ballpark numbers are revenues that were eligible, and they would not include any federal grants included in this. It also does not include our pension payments to our retired police and firefighters and those older pension plans. And it also does not include any debt service amounts. So revenues for 2020 were roughly $71,507,000 for 2020. For 2019, they were $78,442,000. However, the regulations allow us to add in a 4.1% growth factor onto the 19 revenues. They're assuming had COVID not been around, we should have grew by another 4.1%. So they call it a counterfactual revenue for 2019. After you apply the 4.1%, it gets you to 81,658,000. And so just subtracting the two, we come up with a revenue loss then of $10,150,000. And the U.S. Treasury regulations give cities and counties, governmental entities broad latitude on how to spend this revenue loss. It can be for any general governmental services or for other items that aren't specifically eligible under the COVID provisions of the ARP funds.
Thank you, Mrs. Senator.
You're welcome.
So to colleagues and as well as to the public, when we had our review of ARPA during the Ways and Means Committee meeting that I think took place in July, to Mr. Sender's point, this is the opportunity. So for those projects, when we talked about parks, when we talked about things for roads, I'm gonna say that loosely, this is the bucket, once we have those conversations with the administration, that we have the most flexibility for spending. So thank you, Mrs. Sender, for that detail. I do have a question. Mrs. Sender, at this point, do you have a projected year-end revenue for 2021?
We do not. We'll probably have, towards the end of this year, we'll get new guidelines as to what the growth factor will be again. And then based on what the city's revenues for 21, I would anticipate that it won't be near the 10 million mark, but I'm still thinking we're going to have a revenue loss. Obviously, we're collecting more gaming revenues and local development revenues. Those we took a significant hit in 2020.
Okay, thank you. My follow-up question, Councilman. Go on mute. It's feedback.
What?
Go on mute for me, please. Thank you. So for the second question,
Councilwoman Atkins,
yeah.
you're going to the second, number 2?
Yes.
Before you go to number 2, I just want to be clear on number 1.
Okay. It's okay.
I just want to be clear on number 1.
Yes, please proceed, Councilman Brewer.
So what are you saying? The $10 million is pretty much is at the discretion of the administration.
You gotta go on.
It's at the discretion of the administration on how they want to spend it. There's no restriction that will be put in place for the 10 million if we approve this plan. Is that correct?
I don't know if I would say discretion of the administration.
Well, you know, with the council approval, of course, you know.
We're working together for the plan of the
Yes.
city.
Okay.
But I think the better way to say it, and Attorney Colvin, y'all can chime in, and Mrs. Sender if I'm saying it wrong. The direction from the U.S. Treasury was first based on your revenue loss. You can essentially pay yourself back for what that revenue difference is, right, from 2019 and 2020. So after you do that, that money goes into the general fund.
Okay.
So therefore, once it's in the general fund, at that point, then yes, you have flexibility in terms of your use for the monies, right? So the first step is to go through this approval and saying, what is it your revenue loss is? And so we've identified that at 10.1 million. So after we go through the procedure of doing this ordinance and then appropriating it to Fund 176, as we were instructed to do earlier this year, at that point, then you could expense or expenditure, but it has to be from Fund 176. Is that correct?
Just maybe one minor correction. We were proposing that we move some of the other governmental services, let's say it's healthcare expenses, over
You
to
did say that,
AR.
Mr. Cinder. You know I wasn't a fan of that suggestion though, but
Well, this just gives you more flexibility. If you move a chunk of general fund expenses that qualify as governmental services over into 176 into the ARP funds, then that frees up roughly this $10 million in the general fund that can be used for other expenditures. And I think the plan would be the administration will come back to the council then to ask for transfers then for those expenditures to be spent on projects and give the council an opportunity to weigh in on those.
yeah, I remember that.
So I guess that's the nuts and bolts, we haven't got to that point yet to see what we're actually going to use those dollars for yet.
Yes.
We're basically, it's just overall plan.
Yes,
This
we have the
$10
playing cards, but it's how you play the cards. You have
Okay.
how you play your hand after you do this step, I would say. And so Mr. Cinder had mentioned that as a strategy in a meeting that we had prior to with the administration. Again, as a point where you could free up monies in the general fund, which will be the 1.1, where you could use for the flexibility for the mass. Right, Mr. Cinder?
That is correct.
Madam Chair.
I think that was Councilman Brown.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I can't see you though, Councilman Brown.
I'm here. You don't see me?
You're a black box, but we know you're there. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I can see myself on the screen. I'm black box. You don't see me for real. Seriously.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
I'm there. All right. Question to Mr. Cinder. This suggestion about the healthcare and what have you. Are other cities and towns using this formula? That's my first question. Could you have him answer that question for me, please?
I think other cities and counties are considering something similar to what I'm suggesting, and that is you move some of your general fund expenditures that are otherwise eligible under ARP into your ARP fund. It just gives you more flexibility in, say, the general fund then to expend for those items that maybe between the city administration and the council, what you prioritize is important projects to be completed, whether it's fixing roads or it's providing businesses with some supporting funds that were suffered during COVID. You have a broad latitude of what you can use those monies for.
Madam Chair, one more question. When you said considering it, I want to know, is there anyone that's actually committed to what you're suggesting for us? Because I generally like to see a blueprint of success in these sort of matters, so we have a general idea of what road we're going down. Thank you.
Sure, I can provide you what other communities are doing at this time. I don't know that everyone has fully appropriated the full amount at this point. I think they're kind of like the city here. You're doing bits and pieces of it, but many have already established a plan. But I can get for you, Councilman Brown, what other communities are presently doing.
Thank you. If you could get it to our chair and she can make sure everyone else has. I believe in the chain of command. We go through the boss first.
Sure, be glad to do that.
Not the boss, Councilman. Thank you both. Okay, colleagues, are you guys okay for that first bucket in terms of questions? Yep, okay. So I'm going to do a follow-up question to this number 2 in the ordinance, which was the one respective to giving eligible pay to those essential workers that we had performing during the pandemic, they're still performing during the pandemic, right? So I think, Mr. Harper, this might be a question for you. I just wanted to confirm, and I know this is just a plan that could be altered, but I kind of wanted the numbers to be closer to what our real numbers are. And it seemed, I think based on the information that you and I reviewed earlier today, the 5 might be a little bit high compared to what our numbers show for, I think it was more closer to 3.
Yeah, so the premium pay that I put together is a total of, I think it's, I don't have it in front of me now, but it's 2.5 million for premium pay,
Yeah, I have it. It's
And-
2.566.
566. And that would be for the year of 2021. And then the other amount will be for the next year, 2022. Now, it could go up or down depending on the 80% of the rule of 80% of workers working during that time period.
Got it. So we include, we don't include 2020, so we include 2021.
Right, 2021, and then the other half is for 2022.
Got it. Okay. And that's what Ms. Colvin spoke to earlier. That's the same thing we're doing for the payroll one, right? For number 3.
Yes.
Because that was my question too, in terms of, I think our number was closer to 12 million instead of 18. So should
Right.
we? Okay. So if in fact our actual expenditures for those are lower, do we have to alter this? Does it make sense? Do you have to come back and alter this so that you could utilize the monies in other areas? If in fact it does come out lower, because we have into 2024, right, to appropriate a true, and then to 2026 to actual, get the programs done, if you will. So my question is like, say for example, if we do truly come closer to like a 14 million versus the 18 million for the payroll within those 2 years, could you have to come back and amend this to be with more in line with the actual number so that you can free up that additional money for other uses?
I would think that we would have to do an amendment to what was actually appropriated and kind of move it out of whatever bucket it is into the next.
Okay. You agree, Mr. Sender? Just want to make sure
I
we're
do.
aligned.
I
Okay.
do. Yeah, the plan can be amended at any time. And I anticipate many communities will be amending their plans because things will be changing over the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay. So is there, do we have a plan at this point to keep all parties aligned at a future state in terms of what our actual expenditures are for our buckets within the plan as we make it? Like, are we going to connect on a quarterly basis to say, hey, our annual spend for this was estimated to be, I'm just throwing in a 5 million, year to date it's been here, so that we can know what alterations we need to make in the future, if that makes sense.
So the city will be required to make quarterly reporting to the U.S. Department of Treasury. So that report could be provided to the council, but I would think that that would be readily available to you.
Yeah, I would like to make a formal request, Mr. Sender, since I'm sure that you will be a part of, or probably leading that creation of the report, that if one could be sent to the president of our council, myself, as well as the chair of the finance committee, Councilwoman Brown, and then we would distribute amongst the body so that we could just stay aligned. We are the fiscal body of the city, and so we should be making sure that we are actively staying engaged as we monitor our spending with this plan.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Harper, I think you would agree that that could be provided to them.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Colleagues, any other additional questions, comments, statements?
So on number 2, we don't have the timetable outlined. Well, not so much a timetable, but it outlined on who's getting what yet. This is just the overall bucket that we're saying we're going to allocate $5 million for premium pay, but we don't have any direction on who's getting what yet.
I think we do, because Attorney Colvin actually had a head count a little over 400. I think it's 428. And so we do know the number of bodies and what departments, and we can provide that to the council.
But we don't know if public safety is getting $1, if general service getting another $1.
No, we do.
We do.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We have that information.
Okay.
Well, the administration, we
So-
talked about it, so we do have that plan defined, and we could provide that to the body.
So when does that plan come in play with this here? Because it's like we're getting half of it now. But there's some more, you know, the internal plans inside of this that I'm looking to see. So we're talking about the $5 million premium pay for workers. I guess I'm looking for the outline of who's getting what.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Scott.
What I was gonna say is, Councilman Brewer, that what you're looking for really comes in your appropriation ordinance, where we kind of go line by line saying who gets what based on whatever the amounts are that have been decided. This is just the allocation, the plan overall in terms of what we intend to spend and how we intend to spend it. But how it gets divided up is in your appropriation ordinance. And that's still to come before you.
Okay. All right. So there's just the big numbers here. That's all.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Brewer. Any other council members? Okay, great. I don't think we have any members of the public. One here. Oh, you're muted, Councilwoman. Unmute yourself.
Okay, question.
Unmute first.
Are we, next week, are we going to have all these department heads? Is that gonna happen?
Yes, ma'am. I can answer that question. So if you all didn't, it cut off, I think you were not unmuted. But Councilwoman Brown just asked, next week, will we have all the department heads? And the answer to that question is yes. And so we will create a schedule. We'll have meetings over 2 days, and we will notify which department heads should come before the council to give their overview in terms of what their prospective budget is for 2022 in front of us. No, we won't do it next week because next week is our council meeting. It'll be the week after.
Yeah.
The week of the 28th. Okay. So if there are no other comments or questions and all that good stuff, I thank you all for joining.
One last thing, Councilwoman.
Councilman Brewer.
So where I'm doing the numbers, it's like, so there's additional, I guess there's a fourth bucket that's not added. It's like additional 7 million that's still out of the 40 that's missing. So
it's more than that.
It's more, but are you talking about in terms of overall money?
Right. So we're talking about this is the plan here, right? So
it's only a portion, right? So you don't have to do the whole plan at one time. Once we identify opportunities for you to finish of the whole.
So that's what I missed. I thought this was a full plan. I didn't know.
Sir. No,
so
sir.
This is just 3 of them.
Yes, sir.
There's a fourth part that's coming to this then?
This isn't even, these aren't, how do I want to say? This isn't like one per bucket, right? This is of all the opportunities that you have for spend. It just so happens that one of it was the revenue loss bucket that we were saying, right? But another one is eligible workers, which is another bucket, right? But the payroll also falls into the eligible workers. So that's in the same bucket, right? Then you also had public health, you had economic impact, which was one bucket per the US Treasury, but then you also had infrastructure, which also included water and sewer. Remember that we went over, and then also broadband, which is another bucket that we were referring to. So this is just of the mix, the ones that we know we're able to move forward on based on the requirements that the US Treasury set forth.
So I want to be clear where we're at. So are we actually doing a plan on the 80 million or are we doing a plan on the 40 million? Because it's not really spelled out in the beginning what we're actually, how much we're allocating in the plan on here. So I think somewhere it should be spelled out how much dollars that we are allocating inside this plan on the cover sheet.
Okay,
Because
that could be.
I think it's kind of confusing.
I think
it's a mixture.
You know, and the reason why I say that is the revenue, 10.1 million, is the entire revenue loss, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carl. So that means we are appropriating the entire amount of that, but the 5 million for the premium pay, and the 18 million for the public safety payment payroll, actually is a portion and can be amended later. We were just looking at 21 and 22. You know, I'm sure there are going to be costs that are associated in those categories for 2023, that we will be able to amend these categories and increase them if we needed to.
Okay.
So like I said, it's a mixture. The only one that is totally appropriated or totally set aside is the revenue loss, the first one.
The first one. Okay.
Yeah. And so kind of to your point, Councilman Brewer, we received half of the funding of the 80, right? So if you look at what we have a plan for based on this, we have a plan for about 33 million.
Right.
If you just add up what
everything.
Correct. Here, correct. But to Attorney Colvin's point, one of the buckets was revenue loss. So we can check that off in terms of we've already done that, because this is the full amount for the revenue losses, the 10.1. There's no flexibility with that. It was calculated based on a formula that was given to us, and Mr. Sender gave us the detail in terms of how that was calculated. And so that's it. So the additional changes per se that could happen is with the other buckets. And as Attorney Colvin said, it's a mixture of the three in terms of what the future plans will be as well, incorporating 2 and 3 plus whatever we do in the future for the balance of the 7 million that you have from the 40 that we already have, plus the additional 40 that's coming in May of next year, I think it is.
So by March of next year, we have to actually have a full plan of that $40 million though, together.
If I'm not mistaken, by March, you have to have the plan before you can obtain the second half of it, right?
Second half. So how soon before we come back, because there's additional $7 million out here now. How soon will we come back and incorporate that into this plan here for us to be in compliance?
That's a question for the administration.
Hopefully,
yeah, cause I just see $7 million hanging around, and you know, that's like,
we're gonna use it now. We're gonna swap it up. Which just every penny gonna be accounted for.
We're trying to work on this as quickly as we can. So this is not anything that we're trying to delay. I guess that's what my point is, Councilman. So we're going to come back to you as soon as we can with that.
Okay. All right.
Assuring that you guys are also involved.
All right.
Thank you, Attorney Colvin.
Madam Chairman.
Councilman Lay.
Yeah, I apologize. I couldn't get on. I've been trying for several minutes, so I'll catch up by talking to various people, but I just want you to know I didn't ignore it. I knew it started. I just couldn't get on.
Yes, sir, no problem. Let me formally acknowledge my councilman at large, Councilman Attorney Slay, who has joined us. And Councilman Lay, just for your knowledge, for this meeting on the agenda, we had initially both 72, which was an initial plan for some of the ARPA funding. And then we also had 74, which was the operating budget for 2022. And so we only went in detail on 72 for this meeting. And I know you will reach out to colleagues to get the update on that. And then 74 will be in our next Ways and Means Committee, and we will have the department heads come in front of the council at that time to give the overview.
Okay. Yes, because Ms. Chapman sent me the codes. I just couldn't get on.
Yes, sir. No problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can forgive old people, right, Mr. Brewer?
Mr. Brewer.
Sometimes.
No problem, Councilman Lay. All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you guys for joining, and we will adjourn. Again, this 72 will go to third and final at our upcoming council meeting, which will be the 21st on Tuesday via Zoom. And then we will continue 74 at the next Ways and Means Committee meeting, which will be announced on Tuesday during our public meeting. Okay.
One question. There's another meeting after this meeting, right?
Yes, sir. Public safety.
What time is that?
At 6 o'clock. Do you have the codes, Attorney Lay?
Yes, I have I believe I should be able to get on this time. I got the code. She had sent me both codes. I had the code.
Okay, cool. We're good to go. Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the public safety meeting, September the 14th, 2021 at 6 p.m. I am Councilman Ron Brewer, the Chair of Public Safety. Tonight, I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilwoman Mary Brown of the 3rd District, Councilwoman Ty Atkins, Vice President of the 4th District, Councilman Cozy Weatherspoon of the 2nd District, Councilman Cloris Lay, Councilman at Large, Councilman Mike Brown, Councilman at Large. I believe my Councilwoman Linda Barnes Caldwell, Councilwoman of the 5th District, is with us also. Let's see. I see our police chief, Chief Brian Evans, is on also. See the attorney, Steve Jenkins, is on. And I'm just going to announce, I don't see him on yet, but Councilman Dwight Williams of the 6th District, he should be joining us also shortly. Tonight, we have one ordinance tonight, CPO 2021-49, and the ordinance amending number 8831 to include requirements for armed security guards at certain establishments between dusk and dawn, and requiring 24-hour armed security guard at other establishments with a history of violent crime, sponsored by Mayor Jerome Prince, City of Gary, and Councilman Cozy Weatherspoon, Councilman of the 2nd District. I don't see our council president is not on either. Make sure I'm not missing no one. Okay. And also our city council attorney, Renzo Williams, is on with us also. So this is the ordinance that we have tonight, is to talk about the armed security guards at their certain establishment, pretty much at gas stations where we've been having violent crimes happening. Councilman Witherspoon, give us an overview real quick.
Yeah, excuse me, Councilman Brown, Councilman Brewer. Yeah, with the ordinance, of course, this ordinance, of course, is 2021-49. You know, we are looking at the violence that have occurred at these gas stations over a period of the last year or so. And we've had some, of course, some horrific instances that have happened, of course, with individuals, some of them of which we know, some of them of which we are very familiar with. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, there has to be something done at this point in time to kind of curb this violence. You know, this violence is not unique, and gas station violence is not unique to this city. You know, I mean, you're constantly looking, you know, at the news and seeing the televised news out of Chicago and out of the other areas where this has become commonplace. And honestly, I think, in my humble opinion, you know, we as a council, the administration, of course, and we as a council have to take some steps to kind of curb this violence and to keep our citizens safe.
Let me acknowledge also our deputy chief that's on, Deputy Chief Michael Jackson also. I'm sorry, Councilman. Okay. Well, I know we have definitely been having some issues with gas stations in the past couple of weeks. We have had several carjackings that have taken place, and just had a shooting probably a couple of days ago on 49th, I believe, in Broadway, where our chief is on, and I'll have Chief Evans, if he will chime in at this time. But like he's still working there.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm not going to look at the camera as I'm driving, but I will speak. And I just will echo the sentiments of everybody in the spirit of this this legislation that's before you, is that it's an attempt to respond to the violence that we've had at gas stations. And if I could take a moment to try to just give you my personal thoughts on why gas station violence occurs in our communities across the nation, it's because in our communities that don't have some of the amenities of others, I'll just put it like that, the gas station is more than a place for people to get gas. It becomes centers of convenience stores and essential items in certain neighborhoods. And it is a place where everybody congregates in order to get those essential items at a convenient time. And if you walk in any of the gas stations in our community, for the most part, they sell a myriad of items that have nothing to do with gas, snacks, or drinks. Some of them even sell T-shirts and cell phones. And Some of these convenience stores even at one point were allowing you to pay part of your utility bills through a service. Now people do that on their phone. So that is why when people congregate at these locations for various reasons, every element of the community goes there, good and bad. And if you're there long enough, you will see everyone in the community in certain neighborhoods come to those locations because they cater themselves to the things that the community is lacking for other retail establishments. So that is why this is, we see the uptick in violence in communities across the nation with violence in general. You know, it's not just gun violence. We have carjackings, we have auto thefts, and everything going on at those locations. And we sent some data about, you know, the gas stations that under this ordinance would definitely qualify for some type of armed security, and it was over 24 at the time. And since that time, we've had a few more instances, which you just mentioned. We made several arrests in these instances, but it hasn't stopped the activity. These gas stations, for the most part, all have camera systems by law, which is another city ordinance, and we do get cooperation for them. Although sometimes the workers that are in the establishment don't know how to properly use the cameras, and we have to make adjustments on that. So that is, I think, why we see the violence at the gas station and why it takes a huge amount of resources from the police standpoint and our fire department responding with emergency services to respond to those locations. Again, that's just from a public safety standpoint and my personal views on why it occurs in our communities across this nation.
So, Chief, with us putting armed security guards in these gas stations, what would that do far as the strain on the police department as a whole? When you already have a high volume of calls, and if the uptick goes up even higher, how do you deal with the strain on the department?
So as I said in the previous meeting, armed security does not necessarily mean police officers. They have armed security at the gas stations. Some are police, some are security guards. That does not necessarily mean police. I think sometimes we mix the two, that every time we say armed security, you think of police are not security. Police officer would have to be willing to even do that job and be paid appropriately for it. Whereas a security firm could probably man the gas station with people that are armed and trained in security services as opposed to law enforcement. And it's just like a security guard in the bank. It is a deterrent. It is another set of eyes in the bank, someone that is there that has some training that can assist with deterring crime. It may not stop it, but it may give a person pause. That's why you see armed security in the various banks and financial establishments around here. You even have some currency exchanges that have armed security in it, or did before they had, you know, a better system.
So, Chief, what is the time frame that you're seeing the most violence happen inside the city with the service stations?
It happens at every part of the day, but it certainly happens more at night for a couple of reasons.
And can you give us that time frame of night when you say night?
When I say night, I mean 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. That's the time frame I'm looking at. And then from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Those are the time frames where people are getting off work. Those are the time frames where people are at home and need those conveniences. Those are the time frame when we have a mass of people that are available to go to the gas stations. And so that is our busiest shift anyway. 4 to 12, 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. is our busiest time period on the police department, any police department. So that's the time frame we're dealing with. But again, had violence have posed to look for those items without a search warrant, but they have full authority over that.
That it, Councilman Williams?
Well, what's the plan? Are we going to try to get them more involved with going to these stations and trying to remove these items, or
we're working with excise to remove the illegal items, but let me give you an example of how insidious what you're talking about is. So let's take the glass pipes, and we all know what those are used for, that have the roses in them. Those are decorative items. The little baggies are jewelry baggies. They label those things in different manners. And so I think it's going to take more than law enforcement to address the issue, because it may not be necessarily illegal for them to sell these items. That would have to be something, in my opinion, that the law department would have to look at, and that maybe can be done by ordinance if you have items with dual purposes. Now, I'm not talking about the illegal items, which I know what you're mentioning. We are working with excise and other agencies to deal with that currently. right now. I've heard about the paraphernalia and the very illegal items that they're selling in there, and we do have something in place going on right now for that.
Okay. Can I reach out to you later offline to discuss that?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Councilman Godwin?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can anyone from the administration or the sponsor answer the following questions? Has there been any communication with gas station owners since this ordinance was introduced?
As a sponsor, President Godwin, I cannot say that I have personally had any communication with gas station owners. I cannot speak on behalf of the administration in that matter.
Thank you. Chief Evans?
No, sir, I don't know.
Okay, so we're discussing an ordinance related to business owners in our city. There's roughly 53 gas stations, and there's been no communication with the business owners. I think that's one problem. Secondly, one of the issues that we discussed before was the cost of what we are asking them to do. And I don't think we can forget the importance of that fundamental fact. Does anyone know what the average earnings of a neighborhood gas station owner, what those earnings are in the city of Gary?
I don't know. I do not.
Okay, does anyone else know?
Hold on one second, I'm trying to get back on.
Okay.
Okay, no, I do not know what the average earnings of a gas station owner is, but I, to the point that Chief Evans made earlier, these gas stations sell more than gas. These gas stations are almost like convenience stores now. And so I am sure, just based upon the fact that they sell gas and other items, that their revenue is probably up.
Okay, so when you say the revenue is up, what do we say? And I understand that, right? So I talked with a major fuel supplier earlier today, right? So if you're making a half a penny or a penny per gallon, we know that, or even 2 or 3 or 4 cents a gallon, we know that that's not obviously where you make your money, but it's the convenience items. The data I have from talking to gas station owners and just thinking about, what accounting generally looks like for convenience stores is maybe 100,000 to 150,000 on the higher end, and that's probably on the high end. But I'm being generous to try to explain a point. So if a business, let's just say $100,000 for the math, brings in $100,000 after they pay property taxes, after they pay utilities, after they pay for the products themselves, after they pay for security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we now say, even to Chief Evans' point, if you're using a non-law enforcement armed security guard, which I think is riddled with a whole lot of other problems you're going to have because they don't have law enforcement authority, you're talking about a cost even at $10 to $15 an hour that exceeds revenue. And by definition, any business that has costs which exceed revenue is defunct. And so I think that we have to be realistic, as I've said before, when we're having this conversation. We're not and should not be in the business of making businesses bankrupt in our city. The other part of this is, and I've talked with several owners, and I certainly agree with them, that if I have costs based on government mandates which exceed my revenue, then I will, unless I'm insane, close, right? And so because gas stations are a hazardous use, you have underground tanks, you have gasoline, you have fuel. In order to transfer a gas station, you're going to have serious environmental remediation. You're going to have environmental phase 1 and 2 studies, which is why we see a lot of vacant and abandoned gas stations that never take on any different use. They just sit there vacant and abandoned. That's also not what we want to see in the city. Lastly, I think it's very clear to me, and I think to a lot of other folks in Indianapolis and here, that if we should pass something like this, and I certainly hope that we don't, certainly not in its current form, it will very quickly be eradicated in Indianapolis. I think Attorney Williams can speak on this, but the state legislator has the power to limit our home rule authority when it comes to making certain laws. And if we have absolutely no precedent, no other city, town, village, whatever you want to call it, in this state has such an ordinance, I'm not aware of, and we've not asked for information of any city, town, village, hamlet that has this kind of ordinance in the United States of America. So if we're that kind of outlier in a pro-business state that created a law last spring that said cities could not even change their name without them approving it, I'd be very surprised if they allowed us to force business owners to take this kind of expense. They would limit our home rule authority. And I think lastly, and I really mean it this time, we would even lose the camera ordinance because I think they have the power to also say we can't require businesses to do that. So I think what we better do is focus on beefing up our police department. That means serious retention because we're already under 150 officers. Maryville is hiring. East Chicago is hiring. Lake County is hiring. We just the last week have had folks go to Hobart, go to Hammond. So we're losing officers by them changing departments and by retirement. And if we aren't able to meet minimum staffing of 12 officers per shift, and we really need more than that, and I don't care if you have 2 or 3 security guards out there, and certainly if they're not law enforcement, who are they going to call? Ghostbusters? Because we don't have anybody that's going to come in a timely fashion to actually do what needs to be done. Right now, when you call, no one comes in a timely fashion. So this ordinance is well-spirited. I get the idea, I get the notion, but I think we're launching a missile at a gnat, and we're not really solving the problem. And in the meantime, we're creating a business problem in the city.
Mr. President, I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, I just want to reply to a couple of things here that President Godwin stated. We talk about the cost of operations, the cost of business. In any business, and particularly in the industry that I am in, there's a cost of safety. It's just a necessary cost. You can't get around it one way or the other. You have to keep your employees safe. The same obligation holds true to our business owners in this community. They have an obligation to keep their patrons, the citizens of this city, safe as well. In many cases, these gas station owners, they don't even live in our community. I mean, we have to be very real about that. They do not make an investment in our community. They do not hire in our community. They do nothing. They take their monies, they make their monies, and they go out and they live in beautiful $300,000, $400,000 homes in Wheatfield and other areas. And they spend not one dime here. And my opinion is if the cost of safety is just a necessary evil for them, it is what it is. I'm of the opinion also that if one closes, someone else is going to come in and take advantage of that opportunity and open that business back up. It is the American way. It's always happened that way. We have a lot of gas stations that are sitting empty in this community. You're right, there are, but many of them have been priced out because of larger places such as Pilot, Love, Mr. Fuel, places of that sort. And many of them just couldn't make the transition from becoming just gas stations only to becoming convenience stores. So, in my opinion, something has to be done in order to keep the citizens of this community safe. We cannot just stop and say that, hey, the cost of operations is going to be enough to drive them under or drive them out of business, because that's not necessarily so. As President Godwin stated, we don't have any concrete numbers, and to leave it up to them to say it's going to cost them $150,000. How do we know that? One other point I want to make also, and I have to say this. We talk about retention of police officers and the need for police officers in this community. We have a serious need for police officers. We do not have the monies, of course, to hire full staff as we choose. But the truth of the matter is, many police officers leave this community for various reasons, and it historically is something that has been happening, not just in recent times, but it's something that has been happening over the last 20 years. The city of Gary has become, in many cases, a training ground where officers come in, they work for the necessary period of time, and they get their training with the intention of going back home and working or going back to other communities and working. So, I'm not just going to sit here and say that, policemen are leaving and, that we're driving them out because of less pay or this, that, and the other, because that's has not always been the case. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
let me just respond directly. Thank you, Councilman Weatherspoon. So first, it's the duty of the city, not business owners, to provide safety for residents and visitors in the city. That's why they pay property taxes. And I believe they pay them at 3%. Most of these businesses pay more than all of us combined in property taxes, if you're running a gas station with that kind of assessed valuation. Secondly, even if you say $15 an hour times 24 hours a day times 365 days a week, that's $131,400, right? So that's where we get that number from. And as if you recall, the administration had Officer Jolly on here, who has a security company, and he said $45 to $50 for law enforcement, which of course is nearly $400,000 a year. I don't think we want to just talk about residency in the case of small business owners or any business owner. Frankly, and the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, 70% of our police don't live in the city. 70% of our fire department officials don't live in the city. The administration of our police and fire departments don't live in the city. And you and I and others have had disagreements even about our city residency ordinance, questioning whether we should make the controller who doesn't live in the city, because we said, and you and I had this conversation, that there's a talent pool challenge. So when we talk about residency, we aren't even doing that at home within the city. We're not equally applying that. And here's the deal. People have businesses all over this country. I have businesses in 3 states, right? So people work in other states and live in Indiana. Some people work in Illinois, they live in Indiana. Some people live in Indiana, living on the way, working in Indiana. So where someone lives as a business owner is not a criteria for whether or not we should impose restrictions on them. And thank God that they are choosing to establish a business and run a business in our community, because they could go elsewhere. Also, to your point about what would happen, well, it's kind of like the taxi cabs and Uber. When Uber took over, taxi cab medallions became of very little value. So no one wants to then say, oh, Uber's killing the taxi cab, so let me go buy a taxi medallion. No, when industries change, and certainly if it's by government regulation or what government permits, if it's not worthy, if it's not valuable anymore, no one's going to open up a gas station in a city that has these kind of onerous rules. And I think any of us who had businesses, if we were all of a sudden incur this kind of operating expense, would close. And no one's going to buy a business that's under that kind of condition. So I just think it's important for us to be realistic about this conversation, to focus on, yes, we do need to retain our police officers. And I talked with probably 30 of them this weekend because I was at a wedding of 2 police officers, some of whom have left or are planning to leave. And I understand, if I can make $10,000 to $15,000 more a year and pay a third or a fourth in healthcare benefits, that money makes a big difference to their bottom line. So pay is extremely important for all of us who in our own private lives, if we have the opportunity to make substantially more in salary, we would do what's in our own best interest. So we know we have to do something around pay in a tremendous way in order to retain and recruit officers so that we can properly patrol the streets and respond to calls wherever they're coming from. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Councilman Lay.
I've listened to both gentlemen. The one thing I believe they will agree upon is we have a problem, in terms of the city. And we're responsible certainly to resolve the problem. I do not agree with Mr. Godwin, or President Godwin, that you just build up this police force that resolve the problem. That's doing something somewhat indirect. One of the things I thought about, and I think what we should do is spend less time debating right, wrong, and dollars at this point, that as the legislative body and representative of this community, we should move to solve it. What if we looked at some kind of task force that probably could be put in place, not using the regular police officer, but maybe a regular police officer could head it up, we would use reserve police. I think they're still called reserves. This task force would be a mobile task force. No one would know when it was coming, exactly what it's there for. They certainly could look at what's going on in the service station. It may take a lot of things to solve the problem. It may, the cameras may be one of the things I've heard you mention. That's one step. So what we need to do, I think, is spend less time debating whether they could pay under this ordinance. No one believed they can, not $100,000 a year for security, but we're going to have to set up some kind of alternative. We're not going to be able to hire police officers that quick. I mean, at this point, as I understand, what we're doing is giving the police officers their money. We're not looking at hiring anymore. I've heard nobody discuss equipment. We certainly need equipment over there too. So just to have their money, we did it with retirement. As far as I know, and I know the decision hasn't been made yet, this CARE money, or COVID money, that is at Councilwoman Tye committee, I would assume a large part of that will go to the police and firemen. I'd like to see other people there too, like jail services and anybody that worked during the pandemic. So what we need to do, certainly, if we want to do it as a council, do we want to do anything to attempt to resolve this problem? That may be our threshold, a starting point. We decide we're going to solve the problem and then spend time trying to figure out what we can do to at least, make this problem a lot less a problem. I guess I'm repeating the same words, but I do not believe to have the current police force money without hiring additional policemen. And I honestly believe police leave not just based on money. I was on the representative police commission. We even tried to, we started with an ordinance. I don't forget where it has gotten in terms of where a police officer can come in and does not have to, take any kind of test here. I don't forget what we were willing.
You talking about the Mercy Hire?
Yeah. That's it. I worked on that maybe longer than that, 12 and 13. And I don't know if that has really gotten anywhere. So I think we're gonna have to do something. There's no question the police are underpaid relative to other communities. No question we don't have enough. But we also have this problem. I do not believe paying the police officers is going to resolve the problem there. We need to look at something. We know we can give them more money. Hopefully they'll stay. As I understand, they got some of them. I don't know if it's the police, could be the firemen. They're hanging around for a buyout. I know the firemen are hanging around for a buyout. I think it's fairly substantial. I want to say it could be, is well over $100,000. So they're really not going to run anywhere too quick. The new ones may, but not the people waiting for the buyout. So if we separate them and we work toward finding a solution to a problem, we know what the problem is. All we have to do is work toward some kind of resolution of that problem. We don't have to find the problem. We know it's a problem.
Well, Councilman Lay, you spoke earlier about reserve police officers. I believe that number is very small now when you speak about reserve police officers. The problem
can
that we
you hire
have,
anymore?
you can hire, but the problem that you have now is everybody around us is hiring. Hammond is hiring. Maryville just came out hiring. The sheriff just put out 25 officers. Hobart is hiring. IUN is hiring, and everyone pays more than us, and the benefits are much greater and better than ours. So that creates a big problem. And even as the chief outlined before, we can hire 50 tomorrow, but 9 out of 10, they won't be on the street probably until next year this time. if they
I
all
was, no,
stay.
no, I'm talking about the reserve officers a little bit different. I
Oh.
was associating that with some kind of task force.
What, Chief, can you speak on the reserve officer that we have currently now?
We
And
have
possible
35.
hiring some more?
We have 35 reserve officers currently, and we have about 7 that we're getting ready to hire very soon. Understand that reserve officers still have to go through training, not academy training like sworn police officers. And by the way, we have 10 police officers that we hired this year. 9 are in the academy now. We won't see them on the street till next year. But specifically with reserve, they have to finish a pre-basic course, and then they have to do so many hours of training before they're eligible and work in such a manner. And because they're volunteers as reserve officers and are not paid and are not employees with property rights, that has to be on their time and availability. Right now, reserve officers have to have some other type of employment. Many of them work in the mill or other places, so their training takes even longer than a sworn officer. And if I may, not to argue, but I do want to bring out some points which Councilman Lay brought up and other people, and everything is correct about what he said, but I want to clarify that, yes, if we hire police officers, retention is a problem, just as you have said. Everybody you have named is hiring in the 60s right now. The officers that you named earlier that went to Holborn and Maryville are making $62,000. That was a $12,000 raise for them, and they're paying 1/3 of the insurance. Retention is a problem. We have the ordinance where if an officer's here less than 4 years, they pay back. We're collecting from 2. That doesn't stop anyone from seeking better pay and better benefits and better equipment. We have to have an investment in the police department in order for us to retain officers. I would say 2/3 of the officers that have left this department in the last 5 years are working somewhere in this county. And I've said on these meetings before, there's not an agency in Lake County, Porter County, or any federal agency where you don't have a Gary policeman on it. Not one. And in fact, 2 of our federal agencies in this area, the SAC, the supervisory agent, was a Gary police officer. So retention is a problem. It's a problem for us to try to solve collaboratively. And I just want to bring those facts out that that is absolutely true. And I would not be doing my job if I didn't bring those and say that in this meeting.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilman Lay.
That's part of the problem with the police. We know that problem. All he did was define it a little bit different way. Mr. Godwin and I had a very interesting conversation over dinner, which I think he paid part of my dinner. And one of the things, we may have a problem that is not solvable. We may have that. It may appear, our property taxes is ridiculous. Our census is, I think we got more people than the census reflect. We're going to lose, I would assume, federal dollars, state dollars, grants, things of that nature. So there is a problem with the police and the fire department. But that in itself is going to take some time to resolve. Is there anything that we can do in the interim? Because the chief is clear. I knew once you hire, they certainly got to go through the academy. The reserves officers, we probably can pay them the same as any other city, the reserves. We may not be, because he's talking about 35. So we doubled that to 70. That would be a big financial problem. I don't think for the city to do that. Maybe it would be. But we keep identifying why we can't do something. So all of this conversation continues to say I brought up the reserves, and I'm not disagreeing with the chief. He showed a reason why we can't do it. I'm saying let's look at it, work on it, and see if we can't do it. It's easy to come to a problem, and your resolution of the problem is to ignore it. That's really almost where we are now in terms of, and again, I don't disagree with Mr. Godwin's figures, but if you take what he has said and you take what the chief has said and some of what Mr. Coles has said, we basically going to arrive at doing nothing. Nothing. We're doing nothing in the interim. Like I said, we hire police officers. If we hired 100, I don't think they hit the street for a year. I could be wrong. I think that's what it is. They go off somewhere to the academy, training and stuff of that nature. So what we have to do is to try to think of something we can do, not what we can't do. That's where we are now. It appears to me we're going to do nothing.
Well, Councilman Lay, I'm definitely of the opinion, especially with seeing the other shooting that take place at the gas station on 49th, and I believe it was a carjacking somewhere up in the 6th district in one of those where I was shown the live video of that one also, where the gentleman was outside, and the gentleman was inside his car, and two other gentlemen walked past the car, and they came back with an assault rifle and headed on the gentleman and basically got him out of his car at gunpoint. Something has to be done. No longer can we sit back and allow citizens to come in our community, visitors come in our city, and these things happen. Hell, I was basically, I'm just glad I didn't come basically in conflict with the person who took mine, but it happens. Hell, even your city councilman is being jacked for his. So we have to do something, and this is not going away. This problem basically is increasing. Where we had the shooting and a homicide right there on Grant, 23rd and Grant. Just a couple of weeks later, there was another shooting there. There is a problem. And if this is the meeting spot, the gathering spot, because we don't have a Walmart and a Target to get other basic necessities, something has to be done. I know we talked about closing gas station. Then we said we couldn't close because you have to close truck stops. Well, I'm almost at a point where, if you don't have the armed security, you may have to close at a certain time. We have to do something in the midst of this here, because I'm starting to hear the frustration of residents. I'm starting to hear the frustration of just people in general. And as I go around, I have been to several of these gas stations, to ask owners or the workers, what can you all do to help this situation here? We have a homeless problem in this city here, where homeless people are at every gas station. You hear Medea comes on the radio. When we was in council, she talked about how people just hang out in front of gas stations all through. So you don't know if these people are homeless or someone waiting to just catch you slipping and take what you have. You don't know. And you never know. Well, we may say we don't buy gas in Gary, but someone else don't have the luxury to drive to Hobart or drive out to Sam's from somewhere else to get gas. They have to use these facilities. So I think we have a duty to do something. It's unfortunate that we don't have the police staffing to cover everything we would like for it to cover. I tried to get the sheriff here tonight because I think that's an outlet that we can utilize, that outlet. The sheriff did call back to the council office and said that he will be talking to every council person individual about how he can assist in this effort. But I don't think this is something that we can do on our own. We do need help. We know what the numbers look like. We know what the numbers look like for reserve. We know what the numbers look like for our police department. Our city needs help. But one thing I'm a little disturbed about this, as serious as we say this problem is, I need the leader of this city here be having this conversation. I think it's a disservice to every council person here, and even you, Councilman Weatherspoon, as a sponsor on this, that the lead sponsor is not here. No one from the administration is talking about this, and we said this was important. We did a press conference on this. We called reporters and everything else. We called the family back out to a crime scene and did a big press conference, and now we hear nothing. But we hear the council going back and forth trying to work out a problem that someone else said that there's a problem. And we're trying to come up with a solution on it. I think we can, but I think we all need to come together and work on this problem here.
Mr. Chairman, I absolutely agree with the city, the executive branch should participate, because ultimately they have to carry it out.
Absolutely, whatever we do.
Yeah, we don't execute. Only problem, one of the things you mentioned, and I don't want to spend any time saying, well, you can't do that. If you talk about closing, I think you run into what Mr. talked about. They're not going to allow you to do that. That would be the lack of due process. They're not going to allow you to close a station because we developed some kind of ordinance. And I think that's what he used some of his time to say we can't do it. you've identified one thing. Maybe that's the first step. And I agree. I think they dumped it on Councilman from the second district, Mr. Witherspoon. Yeah, Cozy. I think what should be done is we don't need any more conversations from the sheriff. I mean, we really don't. What we need to do is the executive branch.
Well, we haven't had any conversation from the sheriff.
I said we don't need it. In
Yeah.
fact, if the sheriff gives you a solution to this problem, then you got another steak dinner coming from. If you don't, just buy me a hamburger. Not from Culver's. I know who will win that. What I'm saying, rather than bring the sheriff in, and I don't want to play politics with this. I really don't. In other words, this problem has existed. Let the sheriff, the executive branch, and the police chief. See, the technicians are over in the executive branch. The police chief is over there, the fire chief, whatever. The people that run the city are over there, or that should be running the city over there. So there, I think, if this ordinance is the best that the administration can come up with, then they probably shouldn't say anything. This ordinance can't be done. It just simply, so we're going to have to look for an alternative. But I think, like you say, they should participate.
Yeah.
They should participate in this.
Mr. Chair?
Chairman, I'm sorry.
Councilman Witherspoon, then Councilman Godwin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that, and first I want to say that I totally agree, with both of you all that
fully staffed and equipped, meaning they would have to have cars to drive. We would have a much, much larger number of officers patrolling the districts in the city. And that would allow officers to be much more proactive in every aspect of our city, not just the gas stations. And you have to understand the gas stations are just part of the issue in the city. If we are proactive or have the numbers to be more proactive in a city that's 54 square miles, it will allow us to address the problem in a myriad of ways. The task force that was spoken about, more minimum staffing, officers having the freedom to do traffic stop. Everyone drives in the city and does a crime. Mostly getting there and getting away is in some type of vehicle. Let me contrast that for you. The city of Gary is 54 square miles, and we have a deficiency in police officers. The city of Hammond has more residents, but it's 25 square miles and has over 200 policemen. So they're more saturated, more densely populated, but in a much smaller area. So it takes police a lot less time to get from area to area, and they're able to respond much quicker because they have a fully staffed police officer in a city half our size. So that is one of the issues when it comes to staffing in the Gary Police Department, is that our city hasn't shrank. And even though the population is down, that just invites more areas of opportunity for some type of crime, whether it be nuisance and dumping, which you talked about, whether it be crimes of spray painting and blight, whether it be these violent crimes that happen at the gas station and other areas. So a fully staffed police department could respond to those areas in a lot better way. And we can just be much, much more proactive. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
So, Chief, in your numbers of manpower in the police department, does that include reserves?
It does. Reserve officers are required to work 32 hours a month. That's 1 day a week, volunteer time for the police department. We use them for a number of things. They work our traffic control on our lakefront in the summertime because a lot of the officers are on the beach on the ATVs in that 4 square mile period. They work all of our funeral details. They work our special events. They work our patrol division if they come in and do their hours. But each one is only required to do 8 hours a week and a special event. And if they don't want to do 8 hours a week, they can do 16 hours 1 week. And you can't never schedule that with them because, they're volunteers and something may come up. So, but our numbers do include that number of those numbers of officers. And we utilize them in different ways. We even have reserve officers working traffic, proactive traffic enforcement. So yes, they're included in our numbers.
Wow, so that number it really gets even smaller, really,
Right.
when you talk about manpower. One last thing, I'm going to come to President Godwin. So Chief, what would you say if we looked at, as far as the council, as a solution to this problem, if we will probably start paying reserve? to get more officers on the street on a regular. I think that's, Councilman Lay talked about solution. What is that about a solution? How would that help in your manpower shortage? When you can have
Anytime you pay people, you get better service. I'm gonna just be honest. And I'm wholeheartedly for having some type of stipend, some type of way to pay people for their time and enlist them to come in and help us. I have no problem with that, and it certainly would help.
Okay. President
Mr.
Godwin?
Chair.
President Godwin is next, and then Councilman Williams.
Real quickly, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that the goal is not to be a naysayer, but the goal is to, we say we got to do something. That doesn't mean we just do anything, right? I mean, we're making policy, right? And policy decisions have broad implications beyond us voting on an ordinance, right? I mean, the ripple effect is tremendous. I just met earlier today with 15 gas station owners in this city, and I don't think anybody has done that. And one of the things that was brought, and I learned something, I asked them, I said, is it economically beneficial for you to be open between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.? And they said, no, it's not economically beneficial. It's a matter of security. We stay open to keep people from breaking in, from throwing bricks through the window, from coming through the roof, which has happened in other places because people know it's an easy target. No one's coming. No one's looking to come in and steal ATM machines, steal cash, steal goods. And I never really thought about it from that perspective. I think to Councilman Lay's point, I would think of a task force from a beginning standpoint is just having conversation between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the business owners and community to look at because the issue is way bigger than gas stations, right? I mean, there's multiple issues that are at stake here. And we cannot make policy absent of those who it affects. And I do think that we should look at boosting our reserves. I'm glad you asked that question, Councilman Brewer, because I didn't realize that was part of that 150 or so number. But I think that we're not going to solve this problem overnight. And it's probably going to take year, 2, 3, 4 years to rebuild a police department that this city deserves to ensure public safety.
Let me
We don't
clarify.
have that time.
Let me clarify.
Chief?
Let me clarify. No, 150 is our sworn officers. That 35 is additional. When you said include them, we include them in all of our operations, not necessarily our numbers. So I didn't want to give the mistaken image that the 135 is all encompassing of the police department. That 35 is in addition to our sworn, but we work them in our schedule when they show up.
Mr. Chair, can I just follow up real quickly?
Yes.
So one of the issues that I have, or one of the questions I've had, if we have 12 as the minimum staffing per shift and we have 3 shifts, when I hear, and I don't want to talk too much, but when I hear that there's less than 12, my initial question is, are we actually scheduling 12? Because if we're not meeting that number, did we from the onset schedule 12 people so that we're even have the opportunity to get 12 people on the street? The other problem I face is when I talk to residents or I'm in community meetings and I tell them we have 150 officers and I tell them that we aren't meeting minimum staffing of 12 officers per shift, that's 36 people in a 24-hour period. Their question is what are the other 114 people doing? Now I understand it's complex, so we have various divisions and so forth, but we have to be able to answer that question to residents. And I think we need to really strategically look at how we are apportioning the various divisions and roles to ensure that we are prioritizing patrol, which, detective services is important. There's other services that are important, but I think our number one issue is boots on the ground, right? Presence. If people don't see police, they know they can get away with anything. So how do we ensure we're actually scheduling in a way that we will have that right number of minimum staffing? And how do we look at larger, strategic, gonna hurt some people's feelings decisions that will reallocate how we have resources with what we do have to work with?
I'll speak about it briefly. I think that we should have an internal meeting about that because there are some strategies that we are putting forth to address it. But certainly we have staff. The Uniform Services Division is the largest division in the police department. And our minimum staffing is encumbered by people calling off sick, people going on vacation, people going off for military service, and people getting injured on duty. Friday, I had 2 officers get injured on duty. One broke his hand and one got hit by a car, by a drunk driver. Those 2 officers will be out for months. I have another officer that had a serious illness. So when those things happen, it affects your overall staffing. By the police department being down in staffing, we can't easily make that up. So what we do is make it up with overtime. However, officers are fatigued of overtime. And so we have some other plans in place. I can show you our minimum staffing projections. We do them every day. It's not like we don't do those. And we can show you when people are not, where they are and what happened on specific days. But that is an internal meeting that we should have. And I can show it all to you. Not only minimum staffing in the patrol division, but throughout the police department. We have staffing issues in investigations. Patrol and uniform service is definitely important. But after that report is taken, after that scene is done, somebody has to investigate that case, take that evidence out there, process it, interview witnesses, and put a case together. And that takes time.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah,
Councilman.
I know, I didn't think the reserves were part of it. And certainly, what do you think, and then I have a couple other things. Chief, how much you think you'd have to pay a reserve officer to work 40 hours a week?
I think you'd have to pay a reserve officer. Let me just put it like this. When I worked other jobs where I hired reserve officers, working for GH and other places, working certain special events, to get people to come out and do the job, we paid them $20 to $25 an hour.
Okay, okay, no, that's fine. How long would it take you, let's say, to get 20 at that salary rate, get 25 police officers on the street, reserve officers on the street?
They still have to be trained, Councilman. Like I said, I have about 7 that are in the process of doing that. But if we hired 30 today, we would be until January, February before even the reserves hit the street, because they have to go through that 40-hour pre-basic.
No, I'm asking for the date. Whatever they have to do to get there, you hire them today. If they do everything you want them to do, what day would they be available for use?
3 to 5 months, depending on
Go ahead.
Because it's on them to complete their training. It's not like they're in the academy every day. They have to do that around their time.
No, we're going to pay them. They're not. We're going to pay them as police officers. We're going to hire them. They don't have to go work at the grocery store. We're talking about the city of Harris.
So you're going to pay them to do their training as well?
Yeah, whatever's necessary. Yeah, whatever's necessary to get them on the street. Whatever's necessary.
3 to 5 months.
Okay, so that's 90 days. That's a big jump when you say 3 to 5. There was something else that I have known in the past. There was a chief. I'm certainly not going to use his name. He basically put everybody on the street. In other words, we need to see the people who are frontline officers doing something, and then the administrative, how many people you got in administration helping, whatever that frontline group is. If you reassign within your department and took people off of many of these administrative tasks, you could increase the number of people on the street. You just may have a lieutenant out there, or a captain or something may be out there. But you could do that very quickly and increase. So if you cut down what's going on in the street, you're going to cut down on the administrative work going on back at the police station or wherever they're doing it. So that is a way you could very quickly increase the number of people actually on the street.
So we did that earlier this year. We took 10 people out of various divisions, a task force, and put them on the street. I will say this, the more policemen you put on the street, you're absolutely right that eventually it may put your crime down, but that gives officers much more latitude and to do proactive work. And it's going to increase the amount of people that we encounter, come into contact with, and deal with. You have to have people inside the process. Again, if we could come and have an internal meeting where we can show you these things, show you our numbers, show you our projections, show you how everybody works, it would take a couple of hours. I think you'd have a very good understanding of where we are with it, and see that.
Yeah, but I'm suggesting, I would disagree with you. You might have 5 people back here doing God only knows what. If you said 10,
Yes, sir.
What stopped you from taking 20? Why
Because
did you take 20?
because that left me with two officers investigating sex crimes. They have over 1,000 cases. That left me with 4 officers investigating 125 shooting. That left us with 3 officers investigating homicides. That left us, we don't have a jail officer, but those places have to be manned because we have people there all the time. Even our sick and shut-in, when an officer is injured and they can work light duty, that's where we put them in those jobs where we don't have to pull a person. And we're also forgetting that at one time, and I know the chief you're talking about when he did that, he had 256 officers. He had 256 officers, a big difference between what we have now and then. And also, you know, we had an opportunity to pull the officers from the job that were essential to us inside, but we had to sacrifice them to do the uniform services. So if you come and look at what I'm talking about, you'll see that our numbers inside are not that great.
Well, we'll get, I'll get there, and I'm sure Mr. Gow will get there, and rest of the council. What I'm saying, you just told me you got 2 doing this and 3 doing it. Combine the tasks. I think you said rape, and what was the other one?
Violent crimes.
What was that?
Violent crimes. Violent crimes.
Okay, well, certainly rape is a violent crime, I mean.
But it's a different category. I'm sorry. When I say violent crime, I mean someone shooting or stabbing you.
Yeah, but you named 2. You said you had 3 there and 2 there.
Yeah,
and they were
2
performing.
So
You
2
just said
sexual assault, 4 in violent crime.
Okay, take the task and combine the task into one task, and rather then you got potentially 5 people. You could take another one and have 4 people on these tasks. I'm sure they're unequal. Sometimes they got this going on, and they're doing relatively low, and this other group is doing a lot. So combine these tasks. I would suggest, again, free up some police officers. How many police officers? Well, that's okay. You said we'll do it private. That's all right. There's nothing else, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Godwin.
I'd like to ask Attorney Williams to provide an opinion on the way in which we might be able to have some of these conversations in executive session. I realize that we could very easily have members of the Public Safety Committee and 1 other council member, that'd be 4 people, to have a meeting of this kind to discuss policy. But is there a way in which we were able to do a larger meeting, but given the sensitivity of what we're talking about, to have it privately, so we're not, empowering criminals to know our business in terms of what they may be scheming to do?
Mr. President, why not do it with 4 people? I mean,
well, that's fine with me. I know that there are others who may want to
it's fine with me. I don't have to be part of the 4.
To answer your question, Councilman Godwin, this would fall under personnel under which the council has control. So it's an appropriate executive session subject.
Okay. Well, I think we should do that. And I'd like for us to actually do it at the police station. I think we should all take a tour. I think we need to have a very concrete, for those who want to participate, to have a very concrete understanding of what we're working with, what equipment looks like, what morale looks like, what's happening there. Because I will just say, and I echo that the administration should be here, I just don't think we have taken public safety, period, seriously enough. I think I have, but I think there are others who have, but I don't think we are looking at the state of emergency in terms of what is going on. I happen to talk to a lot of police officers as friends and neighbors and residents all week, right? So I'm current and I hear a lot of things that are happening, but I do want to encourage us to do an executive session to really dig down deep into this. I do think it's extremely complicated, and I do not envy Chief Evans because he's battling it on multiple fronts. When you start, I know many of the detectives, when you start moving them around and telling them they're going to have to go on the street, some of them who've said, I want to stay in Gary and I'm going to ignore what the sheriff is offering and what Tom McDermott is offering me, will leave, right? So there is a morale issue you have to consider when you take someone who has several years of experience and has reached certain ranks, and you then force them to do something they may have done 10, 15 years ago, and to do it at a pay that is much lower than what others are making in other departments. So I think it sounds good, and I hear you, Councilman Lay, reassign them. But let me tell you, it's like taking a partner at a law firm and telling him to start writing motions again, right? There's things that people just aren't going to be willing to do, especially when they have options. But I do think we need to dig deep into this, and I will work on getting that executive session scheduled. And I like to do it at the police department so that we're operating in context. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilman
See,
Lay.
right now, we've now left the service stations. We're leaving it. So therefore, we're back to what I say, do nothing. You must always remember, the executive branch deployed the police officers. We can't do that. We may think we can do that. The only thing we can do, until you look at 36473C, now it's the change, because we got that ordinance, that statute sitting there. The only thing we can do is with their increase or decrease in their wages. That's all we can do. We can't deploy. What I'm talking about is a deployment problem. In other words, I agree, but it may become necessary for the attorney in the law firm to start writing motions. Or he leaves, I guess. But I don't think, we can go over there and play politics with it. That's what and say, well, we understand this, we understand that, we understand that. But if you're talking about deploying them and stuff of that nature, equipment, things of that nature, you need the executive branch there. We don't need a private meeting with the police officer. In all due respect, and at least 85% of the time I agree with Mr. Godwin. I don't need to go over there. I don't dislike police officers. I don't dislike firemen, as Mr. Wolf adequately says so. What I think of is this entire city in my thought concept. And I'm not suggesting anything I've come up with really works, but it's an avenue rather than to walk away from this ordinance. We have got to do something with the ordinance. If it takes 3 to 5 months to put a reserve on the street, it's going to take a lot longer to put a police officer on the street. It really is.
Mr. Chair, if I could respond.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you and I both agree, Councilman Lay, that the ordinance is probably unconstitutional and definitely impractical, right? So
there's a lot of problems, yes.
Right. The ordinance that we're looking at is a non-starter. It wouldn't matter if it got 9 votes on the council. I would imagine before Christmas, it would not be happening or not work. But right. Be that as it may, I do think that we have a policy role, right? So when we're considering how we're funding police officers, when we're thinking about the number, when we're thinking about funding for equipment, when we're thinking about whether we should pass an ordinance like this, we need to have a good, solid understanding of how our police department functions, not because we have the ability to deploy, right? But we do have the ability to fund, and we can make policy decisions like this one, right? Which would have an impact on the police department. I think, frankly, you'd see a lot of police officers leave and start security companies, right? Because they might be able to do better as entrepreneurs. So I think that it's not so much that I'm suggesting we go over there to play politics. I welcome the administration to join us and to be part of this. But it's just that we need to have a good understanding of what we're working with.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if you think moving it, that's why I'm suggesting the leadership. If they're running committees, they certainly should be able to go over there expedited. If you take a look at conversations sometimes, they're very narrow as to even who's speaking. But I'm saying if you take 4 people over there, in addition, 3 in addition to yourself, and sit down and go through all of that, and then come back in an open meeting. Whatever you can tell the council, you tell us. It'll move much faster.
Let me ask a question to the chief, and I don't even know if this is even possible, if anyone else is even doing this. Is it possible for a police officer to work in one city and come to another city and work part-time? Just like we may be offering all this overtime in our city, there may be some communities that's not offering no overtime. And just because someone's making $60,000, $70,000, they may be living way above those means and need some extra cash. So is that possible?
Yes, we have officers on our department that work part-time in the South Shore Railroad and the universities. We are actually, that's one of the things that we could discuss when, in our executive session or our public safety private session that we have looked at. But you have to equip the officer. You have to buy the uniforms, which these other departments do. And you have to have a vehicle for them to be able to get in and work.
So it seems like the equipment and the vehicle are two most important things that we need to make sure that we have starting off.
You have to have both for them to work.
Okay.
Their weapons are old. Mr. President, their weapons, they need all new weapons as I understand it. I spent a lot of time talking to the police myself.
Well, we shifting a lot of dollars around. We got CARES Act money, and when we talk about a plan being developed and extra money going to the general fund, this may be some of the conversations that we need to have when we start talking about taking the police department in a different direction, being able to attract new people to come here to help us out in these problem areas that we have in.
Mr. President, what about cameras on the street themselves?
You have to have.
That's equipment.
I heard it probably when Mayor Clay was mayor. When cameras went up, the one on Broadway, I believe. I think we put a couple of them somewhere else in the city. The problem came, who's going to watch it? It comes down to a manpower. You have to have someone to watch the camera.
What is this reserve if we pay $20 an hour? Let him watch it.
Well, yeah, we got to have it. Yeah. But we're talking about a manpower shortage, but that's just another tool to have, but you still need someone to watch it at the same time.
But 911 is not I don't believe it's a sworn police officer. I think it's an individual. If you call 911, a reserve officer can watch the camera.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other council person?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilman.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about police improvements as it relates to equipment, as it relates to personnel and things of this nature. But, just moving forward, I don't want us to lose sight on what has to be done or what we can do in the immediate to deal with the violence at the gas stations themselves. Again, the police do not patrol private property, and with that being said, we have to look at and keep our focus on the gas station itself. Yes, we have issues with the police department. We have shortages in every aspect, but we have to keep our focus on the gas station and deterring the violence at the gas station. Again, it would take 3 to 4 months to put a reserve on. It would take a year to put a full timer on. But what are we going to do in the immediate? And I think that we have to kind of keep our focus there. Thank you.
Well, my plan is definitely not to move for third and final on this. I think this ordinance needs to stay as a focal point out here, whether we move forward and it gets a full passes on or not. I think this can be our tool to continue to keep the conversation going, if anything else. So I would not move for third and final at the next council meeting. I would definitely defer this out. But I think President Godwin said it best that we will have an executive session to go in depth with some things that we wouldn't normally talk about on the camera today. Is there any other comments? I see someone from the public have their hand up. Nate?
He's muted. Mr.
Nate,
Chair.
You're
Mr.
muted.
Chair.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Williams, did you have something?
Did we ever come to a date for that executive session? Because a lot, and President Godwin, you're correct. I've said it before to a lot of other council members. A lot of the information we're discussing is very sensitive in nature. So
No, we
what
have not
is-
come up with a date yet.
Okay.
Okay, Nate.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Lay?
so what's going to happen? Okay, you're not going to recommend it. Is there going to be another committee meeting on this particular ordinance?
I'm going, before I schedule another committee meeting, I want us to have an executive session first.
So you need to to meet, discuss the police officer.
Yes. Yes.
They could speed it up. They don't need 9 people to do that.
Well, as soon as the president calls the executive session, whoever wants to show, let them show. You know, we move.
Oh
forward.
yeah, I won't. I'll be clear on that.
Okay.
But I'm saying if you want to speed it up, you don't need 9 people to speed it up. You can start that tomorrow, 2 days from now. That's all I'm saying. Same way we have only 2 people working on the COVID money.
Well,
As
hopefully
I
we hear the
care
plan
about
tomorrow to say the city address. So hopefully we can hear a plan inside to say the city address also concerning public safety. Hey.
Okay, I mean, I think that's wishful thinking, but that's fine. I'll be there to hear it. But no, what I'm saying is we want to speed this up.
Yes.
So we're dealing with the $40 million with 2 people to go over because why give 9 people 10 if the attorney is there? Give them information that you want to keep secret. The only way 3 people can keep a secret, 2 are dead and 1 don't talk in his sleep. It's the only way that can be done. So don't pile 9 people over there. Simply take your leadership, which is pick 4 people. You, Mr. Godwin, Councilwoman Atkins, and Mr. Witherspoon, and the attorney, and go do it.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, that way we get it done.
Okay. Okay.
And you don't have to have an executive session. You can do
I got
it.
you.
Yeah, you can do it.
Speed the process up.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilman Godwin.
I don't, so let me be clear, and I will just say this, and you'll probably hear more from me about it later. We thought we were working to learn about the COVID money, but we were excluded from, looks like 90% of the conversation. So I was pleased to learn what the city's plan is about ARPA at the chamber luncheon. I guess that maybe the chamber is going to vote on that. But anyway, I only want to do it in the form of an executive session because while certainly those of us who are on the Public Safety Committee could benefit from it, I think this issue is so comprehensive that all of us need to be equipped with an understanding of how the police department works. And I just think that's just that's a very, we don't have anything else. We got to have public safety, right? I mean, if we don't provide any other service as a government, that is the foundation. So we do a lot of great things, but I think at the end of the day, public safety is key. So for those who want to come, we'll do it at a time where I know some work during the day, where people will be able to participate. I just want to be more inclusive than less inclusive. We'll set the date and time, prioritizing the schedule for public safety members, but I certainly want everyone to have the opportunity to come.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Williams.
I agree with Councilman Godwin. It's all our duty to report back to our districts about public safety. So it should be an executive session.
Well, let me say, I don't think not one councilperson have a luxury to sit back and say, I have a crime-free district. I think crime is all over the city, unfortunately. So whatever the president wants to do, I'll roll with the punches with it.
Thank you.
I'm not going to debate whether it's really an executive session, but fine, if you want to call it that. I see it as a potential problem that way. That's all I was suggesting. That if you get it done, your leadership is doing it. It's like any other committee. They come back, they take a look at it, and they come back with recommendations. I assume this is totally. I'm not even sure what. I guess if it's an executive session, it's not under a committee. This is now more or less an investigation privately. So the chief can tell us what he wants to tell us, but we may disagree with what he's doing, but we don't have the executive branch there to do it. So maybe we just give up on the executive branch, go. But I thought you guys would want to do it before the budget. That's what I'm thinking. Whatever we're going to do, if we're going to look at all of this, And it's gonna take more than a single meeting for people to understand the police department, I assure you that. It may take more than a meeting to understand the ranks in the police department. So I was thinking you guys would want to do this before you did the budget. But maybe you don't. Maybe you don't care if you do it after the budget. But you would have to, I would think, do something with that budget. At least that's what I thought.
Mr. Chair?
Councilman Godwin.
Yes, I'd like to do it as early as possible. We'll be looking at early to middle of next week. I'll have to coordinate with, the department schedule and member schedules, but it will be soon. I don't anticipate the budget being voted on until late October, maybe even early November. So I think we have time to do this.
Okay. All right, let me go to public portion, and then if there's any other conversation from councilmen, we'll come back. Nate, you're on at this time.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. And I thank you for making every attempt to try to solve a problem that we're having in our community. But I have to express that I'm a little frustrated because the conversation really centers around public safety, and I understand that really that's all that's under control of the administration and the legislative branch. But to me, it always feels as if we are attacking a symptom and not a disease. It appears as if the people who are committing a lot of these crimes are getting younger and younger. They're getting bolder. They have access to weapons very easily. And I don't honestly think that this is something that should fall on the lap of the police department. I don't believe that this is a police department centered issue, that this is something that we should expect them to be able to solve. I don't have all of the answers. I appreciate the conversations you all are having surrounding it, but it gets a little frustrating to listen and all we talk about police, and we're not talking about why these young people are choosing to do the things that they're doing. I'd be interested to know what the credit score of their family is, what their test scores are, what the socioeconomic conditions are of these kids, and attempt to find a way to combat or help them overcome those issues. And I know those are long-term issues, and I recognize that you all are trying to do something to solve things immediately. But I just would hope that, and I've heard some of you all mention it, that we should have a broader kind of macro approach as opposed to a micro approach. Again, I appreciate the conversation, and I hope you all continue it. Thank you.
All right. No one else from public at this time that's speaking, I see. Public portion is closed. Back to council comments. I understand what Mr. George is speaking about, but at the same time, it's still a crime that's being committed. I don't care if they're 5 years old or 55 years old, it's still a crime that's being committed. It is amazing that the weapons that these young people are getting their hands on at a young age is almost amazing. And I think that's a conversation I don't know if a lot of council members really realize the type of weapons that these young people are getting their hands on. I mean, they have artillery that a lot of times our police department is not even equipped with at those times. It's usually something that the SWAT team comes in with, but they're using this to steal cars, to rob people and things of this nature. And these are, you see it on the news, 12 years old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, you see the ages. They're not older people, they're not middle-aged people. A lot of them that's making the news and we read about them in the paper are young kids, elementary, middle school, high school. That's it. The majority of ones that's committing these crimes. I don't know, Chief, did you all even catch the one that did the crime on 49th, the carjacking there? I mean, those guys look pretty young from the video that I seen, but I don't even know if you all was even able to catch those guys. I know they was under surveillance and it would definitely share quite a bit there.
President Brewer?
Yes.
I believe that chase ended in the alley with those young men smashing that vehicle into a pole, and they abandoned the car and took off on foot. So
from my understanding, the two gentlemen were not cut.
Okay. Yeah, and the stuff that they do, you know, trying to get away from the police, hell, they'll kill about 10 people trying to just get away from the police. So when we speak about these people, they're committed crime. Altogether, it's a crime. I don't care what the age is, it's a crime. We'll deal with those issues afterwards, but I think we have to make sure that the public is safe at hand. You know, we all go in our homes. All of us are Gary residents on this live here, some are council people. Nothing stops us from being victims from crime. Just going in and out your home, trying to come to this council meeting. Nothing stops us from being victim of a crime. So there's a problem, and we definitely need to have a larger conversation with our police chief and about manpower and how we can retain more manpower to put police on the street, because we're not at the luxury to say we have a lot of police. We don't have a lot of police. You know, the city has shrunk in population, but crime is still going on, and we still manning the entire city. But population has shrunk. But the crime problem that we have in the square miles that we have to patrol the city has not changed. So that becomes a big problem for our city. Is there anything else? Not seeing nothing else. Like I said, I would not move for this for passage at the next council meeting. I will defer it out. And Councilman Godwin said he's going to put the executive session on, and we will move forward with that. Hopefully everyone can attend, so we can all get some type of understanding exactly how the police department operates, and some of the suggestions that we may have. We can present them to the chief at that time and his staff, and they can tell us if it's doable, why it's not doable, and we can just brainstorm till we can get to some type of way where we can move forward. Thank everyone for joining, and everyone have a good and safe night. God bless.